phone, especially, let's say, a counseling and supportive, empathetic, emotional processing of trauma can happen on Skype.
Yeah.
And a guided hypnotherapeutic process can also happen. But I think it's better if you can do something in person, like if you wanted to do a holographic kinetic session, to find someone to do it in person is always better. I think people just respond better when they're in someone's presence, in for real, basically, in person.
Yeah,
But
I know there's a hypnotherapist here that does Dolores Cannon type work over here, which might be helpful as well.
yeah, I mean, hypnotherapy has a lot of good applications if it's done, correctly, and we can bypass, what we call the defenses of the conscious mind, or the defenses due to programming, or the defenses due to entities and parasites, which is a really big thing with this whole alien interference thing. It's like there's interference on many levels, and so the whole idea is to get through that interference where we can tap into the core essence of, the highest spirit essence. And then once we can do that, then basically we have the power to change and to eliminate the problem, basically.
Have you seen an increase or a decrease? Like when you follow, we've been following the UFO community a little bit here, but it doesn't sound like the abduction phenomena is as prevalent as it was in the 90s and the 2000s. Have you seen any change? Is it just the way the media is portraying it, or is it been shifting at all?
Well, I think it's still happening, although there were waves that occurred, let's say in the 90s, where there was like a lot going on. There was waves of activity, and we do see waves. There might be different groups, and there's definitely groups that are fighting against other groups to prevent that from happening. But I still think it's happening. But I think the technology has improved that, once they get you physically, they may only have to get you physically once or twice a year or in your life. And then once they have you tagged, they're able to manipulate you at a distance, or, with the frequency and with consciousness. So they don't have to always take you physically. It's not necessary, actually.
That's a funny term for it, tagged, because it's like we're constantly tagging all these other animals and like stealing their sperm and impregnating them. And, like that kind of almost puts it in a better perspective.
Yeah, because that seems to be how people remembered it. A lot of times people remember like early childhood abductions where there was definitely a craft or something, and where there was definitely missing time, or felt like there was a real physical event. And then later in their lives, all they were having were these like weird, vivid dreams, but they didn't necessarily have evidence, or they might have had body marks, but they could never like prove it, and a lot of it is just the memory loss and the conditioning that takes place to zap your memory so that you don't know what happened, But I think that there's other modes of understanding reality where they can literally pull you from one dimension to the next. And, what people report in some of these MyLabs, there's a portal that opens up in your bedroom, and they switch your personality. And let's say if you're already preconditioned from lifetime, from early in abductions, like a MILAB, they switch the personality telepathically while you're in bed asleep. So the personality switches and gets up out of bed and goes through the portal, and then literally disappears for a few hours or whatever, while they do what they have to do in this other environment. And then they'll take them back, open the portal, and they'll go back to bed. But they can manipulate time so that if they take you, you may just, it may just be a few minutes, but in reality, it was like a several hour period of time. So they could manipulate time so that they could take you and you can be gone for a lot longer. And then when they take you back, you're only gone for a second or two or a couple hours. So all this kind of stuff goes on too. It makes it very fascinating, to say the least. Like you can get looped memories. Like I knew a woman who, she's actually in the Dark Side of Cupid book. I don't think I mentioned her abduction, but she had an abduction that happened with two other men on the beach. But all they saw, it was broad daylight. All they saw was like a light in the sky. And it was a momentary sighting where it was just, they just thought it was just a sighting. But when she came back home several hours later, she had all these flashback memories as if something occurred where there was a period of time spent basically being taken with these two other men. And it was actually a love bite thing where they're trying to bond her with one of them. Huh. And, but when they took her back, I mean, basically they reversed time so that they didn't have any missing time at all, but she got the looped memory. So the looped memory came afterwards, basically. And she was the only one who remembered it. Actually, the other guys, they didn't remember anything at all. They thought nothing happened. All they thought was that they just had this UFO sighting. But when she remembered everything, there was an actual abduction that took place.
That's
So
interesting.
that kind of stuff happens where there's groups taken. I mean, sometimes, they can mutually, have witness testimony for each other in a group abduction or a joint thing where there's like a love bite thing going on. So, yeah.
I was listening to this short little audiobook on exorcisms last night, and actually I went to see the movie The Seventh Son. It was kind of interesting. So it was all intertwined around the same type of premise. But it's amazing the increase. Like there's like hundreds of thousands of them going on in Italy and other places now. There's been a massive increase in exorcisms. And then I also heard a stat about Wicca, and not to say that Wicca is good or bad or anything like that, but apparently there was like 8,000 people involved in Wicca in the late 90s or something like that, and only like a decade later there's like 1 million, or it's coming up on 1 million. So have you ever thought about the increase in interest in these things, or does it seem like to you that things are opening up? And
Yes, very much so. I mean, we're seeing a progression over time of certain belief systems that are probably opening up interdimensional windows and access of some of these darker beings, but other beings as well. I mean, but like portals are being opened through certain means, which can be done in different ways. They can be done scientifically. They could be done with rituals and ceremonies and invocations of certain kinds of beings where maybe they don't realize. They think, oh, I'm just doing this wonderful earth ceremony calling on, whatever, and they think it's a good being, and then what maybe they're really doing is opening up an interdimensional portal for a bunch of other beings to come through. So that can happen. So
like even the increase in Ouija board sales and all that, right? Like after that movie came out, so that's kind of playing around with stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's opening windows. It's like going into the ghetto and like not locking your door and thinking you're not going to get ripped off. It's like, that's what this whole environment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in our environment. There's a lot of infections or open windows of stuff. You have to be really careful. I mean, I think it's good to shield and protect yourself when you're doing anything that could open up windows. Even surgery, even anesthesia can open yourself up to interdimensional interference, or getting an entity or something, or, getting really wasted, getting drunk, or having substance abuse could open up windows. Doing certain kinds of channeling, seances, Ouija board. I mean, you could open yourself up if you don't know what you're doing. So, sure.
Can you talk about some of those shielding techniques then? Like protection, daily protection practices you can do?
Well, I still think keeping your heart and mind clean and your body clean is good. Like, basically praying for the good things for others, and like maintaining this joyful sense in your being to like basically raise the vibration of your emotional and mental state is a way to naturally kind of have a natural shield. But sometimes it takes prayer and intention, and maybe even visualizing different colors of light that have higher frequencies around you or your entire home. Mm-hmm. Or, praying with people helps, or closing those interdimensional windows through, let's say, a holographic kinetic session or a healing session. Basically, healing your own trauma and wounds is the biggest way to clear out things, because if people don't do their healing work, they're just going to be open portals, basically,
Yeah, it's hard to somebody that doesn't think that it's hard for people to know that, or to realize that they have healing work to do, I think. I mean, sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's subconscious, and it's hard to understand where you need to go. But can you talk a little bit about that holographic kinetic stuff?
Well, that's something that I've done a training actually when I was in Canada last summer, and I'm going to do another one in New York coming up. And it's actually Steve Richards of Australia actually created and developed this method based on his own unique gifts and understanding of the universe, basically based on his Aboriginal lineage, what they call the dream time, and the healing and the understanding of how the whole universe, earth works, spirit works through that understanding, which is really amazing. I think some of the indigenous races have a really good connection that way and a good understanding of, the spirit world, for example, and how that interacts with us in the physical world. And so he developed not only what he knew innately from his lineage, but also what he learned from hypnosis and NLP and basically the basics of trauma healing and resolution and clearing and hypnotherapeutic process. It's all kind of combined together with the spiritual power of understanding the universe as a holographic universe, as well as understanding the Aboriginal dream time. And he calls it point zero. When you connect with your spirit, when you have that deep connection where you can be in the eternal now and the neutral 0 point, then that is a powerful point from which to act in terms of your own healing or helping someone else heal. So it's really learning how to access that. But in order to learn how to be a good practitioner, you really have to learn how to clear your own traumas and do your own healing work and connect with your spirit, and learning how that is, as opposed to, I guess, one of the biggest things that I learned was that in our world, with all the different religions and spirit guides and deities and gods and false gods, that we've basically been programmed to connect with all these other, let's say, off-planet gods, these false gods from other star systems or patriarchy or spirit guides or whatever it is, instead of just connecting directly to our own spirit and the earth and the greater all that is.
Your higher self.
It's like keeping it really pure, keeping it really, really simple. And once you get that pure, simple, authentic, internal connection that's inside of you, that is the ground for where all knowledge comes. So basically, you just let go of those religions, really, and let go of, these deities and these channeled spirit guides or whatever. I mean, some may be helpful. Some spirits and stuff may be helpful. It's just that you have to really clear it out to get clear enough to know, how not to be led into a false system, because there's a lot of corruption and falseness in the spiritual belief systems of this world, to put it bluntly. I pop people's bubble on that, but that's what we've learned is, keeping it simple, keeping it pure is really the best way to go.
Right. Well, how about talking about your Rise Multiversity before we end up running out of time here?
Okay, well, Rise Multiversity is actually a web and audio, I guess an audio video format that we can basically connect on. It was through several colleagues. Sienna Leia is the one who actually started it, and it's a way that we can do support groups or discussion events on a web and audio format where many people could join together, or we can, let's say, have 5 panelists on video to discuss and then do a question and answer where people can actually literally interact video and audio with us in that kind of format. So it's a way of basically getting community support and discussion out there on a webinar kind of format.
Mm-hmm.
So we want, she wants to expand it with many different kind of capabilities like mentorship and programs and subscribership or whatever. But for now, we're doing like a lot of events and discussions and support in that format. So that's what I'm doing too as part.
And you've got one coming up on the 28th. I'll put that in the show notes too. And that's limited to a certain number of people,
it's
right?
Limited to like 100 people max for the interactive aspect, although it could probably be purchased later, like as an audio format to listen to.
Right.
But we may do this to be several parts because from what we understand, there's so much to discuss. We could probably make this a series to talk about like the alien abduction, the MILABs, the mind control, the spiritual elements, the love bite, everything. And, it's a diverse subject matter when we really get going. And we could probably make it a series and have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm thinking about, I'm going to try to send some people your way too for consultation and all that. And you can do that, right? By going to your website.
Yeah, it's best just to go directly to my evelorgen.com website. And then if you want to send a email, just go through the contact menu button where you could fill out a little form and then put like want a session in the subject matter. And then there's like a PayPal thing if you wanted to purchase a session. I get a lot of emails, so sometimes I can't always respond quickly. So that's just how it is, these days. But that's one way to get in contact with me. I'm on Facebook too, although I don't always get on Facebook every day. So it's probably better through the web.
And you're on the Twitter too?
Yeah, but I don't do that very much. I mean, I just send off a thing now and then. I don't have time, I get really busy. And I guess that's the problem with sometimes doing this kind of work is that so much of it is online. And I really like to